Wayfinder, the dungeon-crawling, stylized ARPG said to be the spiritual successor to WildStar, launched into early access with awful reviews. It has finally had its 1.0 launch. Has the game overcome its issues, or
does it suck?
Developed and published by Airship Syndicate, Wayfinder is a dungeon-crawling action combat RPG that has you playing as a Wayfinder looking to cleanse the shattered world of Evernorth from the gloom that has taken over. The game was initially going to be released as a free-to-play MMO Lite, but due to some of the issues with the original publishers and not being able to find a new one, Airship Syndicate went in-house and decided to shift to a box price, no microtransaction or battle pass model, and turned it into a co-op ARPG instead. Wayfinder can be played solo or in a group up to 3 players. In my playthrough, I played entirely solo as I couldn't get my friends to take a gamble on what was labeled a bad game. When you first start the game, you get to pick from one of 3 Wayfinders: Wingrave, Nis, or Silo, each one of them with their own unique abilities and set of starting weapons. You are then set off to the world of Evernorth and you play through the main story. Here you get to see the basic gameplay loop, which is doing the main story quest, leading to dungeons, finishing up with a big boss after completing the set of dungeons. While this is a fairly simple gameplay loop, it is quite enjoyable, even into the endgame. The dungeons have their own events and are randomized each time, all ending with a mini boss fight. Dungeons can also be mutated with up to 3 mutators, changing the difficulty and abilities of all enemies within it. Outside of the dungeons, you do have the overworld, which expands on the world and does allow you to find treasures, unlockables like Wayfinder Echoes, and complete open world events for gear and materials. This part of the game does feel a bit empty though, as at least the first zone was built with the intention of multiple players running through it. The game also allows you to select the difficulty, although this may be its worst implemented design, as there's no true benefit on playing on a harder difficulty outside of the challenge for yourself. They did add a new nightmare mode that does award cosmetics for completing, but it seems more like a challenge mode and rather than a true difficulty option, as you have to start fresh to attempt it. Where the game really shines is the complex and interesting bosses, all of which can be mutated to add another level of difficulty. They are surprisingly varied, fighting bosses like a giant spider that summons its young, or the echoes of the once great Argent Hand, even taking on giant shadow gods of the gloom. They really do get better the farther into the game you get. The endgame consists of doing challenging dungeons for the best gear and doing mythic hunts, which are basically hard mode versions of bosses that you've already completed. There are also job boards that give currency and materials, kind of a daily thing to do. You can also get quests to do the mythic hunts that give some of the best gear and weapons. Wayfinder uses a free target action combat system that is reminiscent of games like Kingdom of Amalur or even Souls-likes, with much quicker and fluid movement and less animation locks. This allows you to make quick reactionary adjustments in fights rather than having to know the swing mechanics and timers of every enemy you face. You get to pick how you want to play in terms of combat style, with diversity in Wayfinders, effectively your classes, your weapons, and even building stats to your liking. You have 8 total Wayfinders to choose from, divided into 3 archetypes. Warmaster, which are your tank and bruiser characters, focusing on taking damage, sustaining, and dealing constant damage, keeping you in the fight longer. Arcanist, which are your DPS classes, focus on high damage and bursts, with much lower defenses and sustain, trying to end the fight quickly. And Survivalist, these are your support roles, however within the game there isn't a big need for support, so these play more like a balance between Warmaster and Arcanist. Your kit for combat consists of light attack, heavy attack, and 5 abilities, 3 of which are your Wayfinder's regular abilities, 1 is your Wayfinder's ult, and the 5th is your weapon specific ability, which changes based on your weapon type and even the specific weapon you're using. You will combo all of these while fighting through waves of fodder minions, attacking mini bosses, and fighting big bosses, building up a combo meter that is a stacking damage buff. Every Wayfinder can also augment their abilities. Of the 4 abilities you get, you have points to specialize in them. You don't get enough points to get them all, so you have to pick and choose, really making your build your own. Support combat, you also get potions consisting of healing potions that are limited, similar to what you would see in Souls-likes. You also get flasks that give you a big bonus to attack or defense stats, really helping you get through tough fights. The customization in Wayfinder is very well done. While you don't have an insane amount of character customization and every Wayfinder is gender locked, you do get to customize each piece of gear and dye them all how you'd like, which to me is all I really care for anyways. It helps share a good amount of unlockables and dyes, all found in the game or purchased with in-game currency. There's so much diversity in what you can choose, be hard pressed not finding something you like. On the flip side, there is a huge amount of character build customization from your gear, your stats, your weapons, and your playstyle. As I mentioned before, there is a no weapon lock in the game, and you can use any weapon on any character. This means if you want to play Nis, the rogue, with a two-handed sword, hey, more power to you. It gets even deeper than that. You have your abilities, each with their own skill levels to add passives and more effects to, affinities that add base stats depending on what gear and echoes you have equipped, and class-specific perks when reaching certain breakpoints. Echoes that add stats and slot it into rush slots with types like combat, guard, cross, and balance, all having stats based on their type. These echoes are found throughout the world when killing enemies and bosses, which can drop unique echoes that add more passive or combos to your character. You also have talents, and these are basically just more stats to your base stats, and echo slots, and honestly it feels a little redundant to have when everything else is already built in, but I don't mind having the ability to build my Wayfinder exactly like I want. The gear of your Wayfinder is separated into 3 parts, one being your armor. This is done in a unique way from other games. Each piece you find will go into an armor set menu, and the 5 pieces give you a percent change to your stats, like ability power and defense, or max HP and crit power, and all these can be mixed and matched to your liking. The second is your accessories. This is where it gets a little complicated with your gear. You get a million drops of accessories, often with the same type. They will have set bonuses and stat type that stay the same, but the values will be different, and so will the rush slots. So finding the perfect one can be a challenge. Not to mention there's no easy way to determine what you're picking up when you pick it up. You often have pages of accessories to go through. Even the UI for changing it can be annoying. The third is a little more straightforward. This is your weapon. These have varied stats and echo slots with obviously different playstyles. The final bit of customization is one I haven't touched too much, but I know it's big for some people, and that's housing. There are so many housing items that I have packed away for whenever I decide to switch from killing things to becoming a Sims character and getting all cozy. From what I can tell, there's only one house or apartment currently, but it's very large, and there are enough housing items in the game that this could easily become endgame for some people. Cartoonish stylized visuals play really well into this game. I think they look great. I've always been a big fan of them, especially in games like WildStar or World of Warcraft, and they do a great job in this as well, having varied environments where you'll never get bored looking at the scenery. Customization in this game is massive. There is a lot to do, and I really enjoy having the ability to theory craft and make my character like I would, something you would see in other ARPGs like Diablo, Last Epoch, or PoE. I love action combat. Give it to me in every game I can play. I want to see it more and more. In this game, I feel like it does it very well. I enjoy playing through it and fighting. There's a decent amount of replayability in the game. While you don't have to go back and play through the story again, unless you want to challenge the nightmare mode, you do get to try each Wayfinder at the end game. And you don't have to go back and play through the story to do this or grind up your levels. You get a lot of EXP bonuses throughout playing the game, which gets you right into the action. I think this is big. Even though I didn't get to do it, it is always a positive for me. I love having the ability to play with friends, even if they don't want to play with me. While the overall quality of the game is really good, there are definitely some polish issues. You'll be doing quests and some will have voiceovers, some won't have any voiceovers, some will just be 2 characters staring at each other with text on the screen, and the worst I've seen is just a black screen with white text over the front telling me what's happening. I mean, it feels like something from pre-alpha. You also get bugs. While there isn't a ton of them, I've definitely fallen through the world, gotten stuck, and the worst bug is playing characters with dots while fighting a big boss. Dying during that boss, I'll have enough time to res and get back in the fight, which never resets the boss like it's supposed to, and it just feels bad. This is needed big time. There's some Wayfinders that just feel completely inferior to other ones, at least while playing solo. I'm sure in multiplayer, they all have their place, but there's like 3 Wayfinders you can play if you just want to breeze through the game, no matter what difficulty you're on. Honestly, the biggest difficulty challenge is your Wayfinder. There is no doubt in my mind that some of this UI needs some major overhaul. Some of it just looks bad, or you just have a ton of information coming at you at once, and it just a little bit of a visual overload. And don't even get me started on the accessories. That whole menu system is just god awful. Like I said before, the difficulties feels like a complete afterthought. There's no reason push to do anything harder. Better stuff doesn't drop, more stuff doesn't drop, nothing. It's just if you want a challenge. To me, that feels a bit ham-fisted. It does feel like there are some holdover systems from when the game was still an MMO light, like the job board. Feels like it should have been a daily thing, which it probably was, but now you just do them repeatedly, and it just feels mind-numbing and not needed in the game at all. So, does it suck? No, not at all. It's awesome to see what Airship Syndicate has done. It's a complete 180 from its initial early access launch, and they put a ton of work into it instead of letting it die. I'm a big fan of where the game's at. Even with the cons, they're honestly really small and infrequent, minor gripes mostly. If you like games like Warframe or Souls-likes, albeit this is easier, Wayfinder is right up your alley. Hope to see more content drop for this game, and I expect big things. But, as always, my word isn't law, it's just my opinion.